A long time ago, there was a king of the kings of the Banu kingdom, in the islands of India and China, a lord of armies, guards, servants and dependents. He has only two sons, one in the prime of manhood, and the other yet a youth. While both were knights and braves, the elder was a doughtier horseman than the younger. So, he succeeded to the empire. When he ruled the land and lorded it over his lieges with justice, so exemplary that he was beloved by all the peoples of his capital and of his kingdom. His name was King Shahryar, and he made his younger brother, Shah Zaman, king of Samarkand in barbarian land. These two ceased not to abide in their several realms, and the law was ever carried out in their dominions, and each ruled his own kingdom, with equity and fair dealing to his subjects, in extreme solace and enjoyment. And this condition continually endured for a score of years. But at the end of the 20th 12-month, the elder king yearned for a sight of his younger brother, and felt that he must look upon him once more, so he took counsel with his wazir about visiting him, but the minister, finding the project unadvisable, recommended that a letter be written and a present be sent, under his charge to the younger brother with an invitation to visit the elder. Having accepted this advice, the king immediately prepared handsome gifts, such as horses with saddles of gem-encrusted, gold, Mamelukes or white slaves, beautiful handmaids, high-breasted virgins, and splendid stuffs and costly items. He then wrote a letter to Shah Zaman expressing his warm love and great wish to see him, ending with these words, "I hope of the favor and affection of the beloved brother that he will condescend to bestir himself and turn his face uswards. I have sent my wazir to make all ordinance for the march, and my one and only desire is to see you before I die. But if you delay or disappoint me I shall not survive the blow. Wherewith peace be upon you." Then King Shahryar sealed the message and given it to the wazir with the offerings aforementioned. Commanded him to gather his strength and make all expedition in going and returning. The minister went to ready up without stay and packed up his loads and prepared all his requisites without delay. This occupied him 3 days, and on the dawn of the 4th day he took leave of his king and marched right away over desert and pleasant lea, without halting by night or by day. But whenever he entered a realm, whose ruler was subject to his suzerain, where he was greeted with magnificent gifts of gold, silver and all manner of presents, fair and rare. He stayed there 3 days, and left on the 4th. He then honorably escorted for a whole day's march. As soon as the wazir reached near Shah Zaman's court in Samarkand, he dispatched one of his high officials to report his arrival, who presented himself before the king, and after greeting the king, he delivered his message. Hereupon the king commanded his brother and lord of his realm to come and meet his brother's wazir at the distance of a full day's journey. Which he did, greeted him respectfully and wishing him all prosperity and forming an escort and a procession. When he entered the city he proceeded straightway to the palace, where he presented himself in the royal presence. After greeting and praying for the king's health and happiness and for victory over all his enemies, he informed him that his brother was yearning to see him, and praying for the pleasure of a visit. He then delivered the letter. Shah Zaman took from his hand and read. It contained sundry hints and allusions which required thought. But, when the king had fully comprehended its content, he said, "I hear and I obey the commands of the beloved brother. But we will not march till after the 3rd day's hospitality." He arranged the minister fitting quarters in the palace, and pitching tents for the troops, rationed them with whatever they might require of meat, drink and other necessaries. On the 4th day he gets ready for wayfare, and gathered sumptuous presents befitting his elder brother's majesty, and stablished his chief wazir as the viceroy of the land during his absence. Then he ordered his tents, camels and mules to be brought forth and encamped, with their bales loads attendants and guards, within sight of the city, in readiness to set out next morning for his brother's capital. But in the midnight he thought of something, that he had forgotten in his palace, which he should have brought with him, so he returned secretly and entered his apartments, where he found the queen, his wife, asleep on his own carpet bed, embracing with both arms on a black cook, of loathsome aspect, foul with kitchen grease and grime. When he saw this, the world turned black before his sight and he said, if such case happens while I am yet within sight of the city, what will be the doings of this damned whore during my long absence at my brother's court? So, he drew his scimitar and cut the two of them in 4 pieces with a single blow, and left them on the carpet and returned presently to his camp without letting anyone know of what had happened. Then he gave orders for immediate departure, set out at once and began his travel, but he could not help thinking over his wife's treason, and he kept saying to himself, "How could she do this deed to me? How could she invite her own death?" Till excessive grief seized him, his color changed to yellow, his body waxed weak, and he was threatened with a dangerous malady, like one as bring men to die. So, the wazir shortened his stops and stayed long at the watering stations and did his best to solace the king. When Shah Zaman drew near the capital of his brother, he dispatched vaunt couriers and messengers of glad tidings to announce his arrival. Shahryar came forth to meet him with his wazirs, emirs, lords and grandees of his realm, and saluted him and joyed with exceeding joy and arranged the city to be decorated in his honor. When the brothers met, the elder can't help to see the change of complexion in the younger brother. He questioned him. He replied, "This caused by the travails of wayfare, and my body needs care, for I have suffered from the change of water and air. But Allah be praised for reuniting me with a brother so dear and so rare." On this wise he dissembled and kept his secret. He added, "O King of the time and Caliph of the tide, only toil and moil have tinged my face yellow with bile, and hath made my eyes sink deep in my head." Then the two entered the capital in all honor, and the elder brother lodged the younger in a palace overhanging the pleasure garden. After a time, seeing his condition still unchanged, he concluded that it caused by his separation from his country and people. So, he let him wend his own ways and asked no questions to him, till one day when he again said, "O my brother, I see that you grow weaker of body and yellower of color." Shah Zaman replied, "O my brother, I have an internal wound." Still, he would not tell him what he had witnessed in his wife. Thereupon Shahryar summoned doctors and surgeons and commanded them to treat his brother according to the rules of art, which they did for a whole month. But their sherbets and potions not worked, for he would dwell upon the deed of his wife, and despondency, instead of diminishing, prevailed, and leechcraft treatment utterly failed. One day his elder brother said to him, "I am going to hunt course to take my pleasure and pastime. Maybe this would lighten your heart." However, Shah Zaman refused and said, "O my brother, my soul yearned for naught of this kind, and I like to stay quietly in this place, and wholly take care of my malady." King Shah Zaman passed his night in the palace, and next morning, when his brother gone for the hunting, he get out of his room and sat down at one of the lattice windows overlooking the pleasure grounds, and there he starts thinking with saddest thought over his wife's betrayal, and as he continued in this case, a portrait of the palace, which was carefully kept private, swung open and 20 slave girls came out of it, surrounding his brother's wife, who was wondrous fair model of beauty, to the cooling stream. Thereupon, Shah Zaman drew back from the window, but he kept spying them from a place where he could not be exposed. They walked under the very lattice and advanced a little way into the garden, till they came to a jetting fountain. Then they stripped off their clothes. 10 of them were women, concubines of the king, and the other 10 were white slaves. Then they all paired off, each with each, but the queen, who was left alone, presently cried out in a loud voice, "O my lord Saeed!" And then suddenly a big slobbering negro with rolling eyes which showed up, with a leap from one of the trees. A truly hideous sight. He walked boldly up to her, and threw his arms round her neck, while she embraced him warmly. Then he takes her and winding his legs around hers, as a button loop grasp a button, he threw her and enjoyed her. On likewise did the other slaves with the girls, till all had satisfied their thirst, and they ceased not from kissing, coupling and carousing till the dawn, when the Mamelukes rose from the damsels' bosoms, and the negro slave dismounted from the queen's breast. The men resumed their disguises and all, except the negro who swarmed up the tree, entered the palace and closed the postern door as before. Now, when Shah Zaman saw this conduct of his sister-in-law, he said in himself, "By Allah, my calamity is lighter than this." My brother is a greater king among the kings than I am. Yet this infamy occurred in his very palace, and his wife is in love with that filthiest of filthy slaves. But this only showed that they all do it, and that there is no woman who doesn't cuckolded her husband. May the curse of Allah fall upon all the fools who misconduct in their life. So, he put away his sadness, despondency, regret, repine, and put aside his sorrow by constantly repeating those words. This is my conviction, that no man in this world is safe from their malice. When supper time came they brought him the food, and he ate with voracious appetite, for he had long refrained from meat, feeling unable to touch any dish however good it was. Then he returned grateful thanks to Almighty Allah, praising him and blessing him, and he spent a most restful night, it having been long since he had savored the sweet feel of sleep. Next day he broke his fast heartily and began to recover health and strength, and presently regained excellent condition. His brother came back from the chase 10 days after, when he rode out to meet him and they saluted each other, and when King Shahryar looked at King Shah Zaman, he saw how the hue of health had returned to him, how his face had waxed ruddy and how he ate with an appetite after his late scanty diet. He wondered much and said, "O my brother, I was so anxious that you would join me in hunting and chasing, and would take the pleasure in my country." He thanked him and excused himself. Then the two of them took horse and rode into the city, and when they were seated at their ease in the palace, the food trays were set before them, and they ate their full. After the meats were removed and they had washed their hands, King Shahryar turned to his brother and said, "My mind is overcome with joy at this condition. I was desirous to carry you with me to the chase, but I saw you changed in hue, pale and in sore trouble of mind too. But now by the grace of Allah, I see your natural color had returned to your face and full of energy now. It thought that your sickness came from the thought of your family and friends, and the absence from country, so I stay away from troubling you with further questions. But now I beseech you to explain the cause of your sadness and the change of color, and also explain the reason of the recovery and the return of health, which I didn't watched. So, speak out and do not try to hide." When Shah Zaman heard this, he looked down for a while, then looked at his brother and said, "I will tell what is the cause of my illness, but don't force me to tell the reason of my complete recovery. Indeed, I pray to not to press me for a reply." Then Shahryar, who was much surprised by these words, said, "Let me hear first what caused your poor condition." Then Shah Zaman replied, "O my brother, that when you send the wazir with the invitation to show myself before you, I got ready and marched out of my city, but I remember a string of jewels left behind in the palace, that I procured as a gift to you. I returned for it alone and found my wife on my carpet-bed and in the arms of a hideous black cook. So, I slew them and came to you, yet my thoughts brooded over this matter and I lost my appetite and became weak. But excuse me if I still refuse to tell, what was the reason of my complexion returning?" Shahryar shook his head, marveling with extreme marvel, and with the fire of wrath flaming up from his heart, he cried, "Indeed, the malice of woman is mighty." Then he took refuge from them with Allah and said, "O my brother, you have escaped an evil by putting your wife to death, and right excusable for your wrath and grief for such mishap, which never yet befell crowned king like you. By Allah, had the case been mine, I would not have been satisfied without slaying 1,000 women, and that way madness lies. But now praise be to Allah that you restored to the complexion and health, and explain to me what caused this recovery. O King of the age, again I pray you to forget this matter. No, you have to tell me. O my brother, I fear after you realize the cause, you will get into more anger and sorrow than me." Shahryar said, "That were but a better reason, for telling me the whole history, and I swear in the name of Allah I will not back aught from me." Thereupon Shah Zaman told him all he had seen, from commencement to conclusion, ending with these words, "When I saw this calamity and the treason of your wife, O my brother, I realize that it is even happening to my brother, my sovereignty, my superior, my own sorrow is very low with compared to you, and my mind recovered tone and temper. So, throwing off my sorrow and sadness, I was able to eat, drink, sleep, and thus I speedily regained my health and strength. Such is the truth and the whole truth. When King Shahryar heard this, he raged with exceeding wrath, and rage was like to strangle him, but then he recovered himself and said, "O my brother, I don't think you will lie in this matter, but I cannot believe it, till I saw it with my own eyes." Shah Zaman said, "You would look upon the calamity, rise at once and make ready again for hunting, and then hide yourself with me, so that you can witness it with your own eyes and verify it." "True," quoth the king. Whereupon he made public announcement of his intent to travel. Then the troops and tents moved out of the city, camped within sight, and Shahryar gone out with them. When night came, he summoned his wazir and said to him, "Disguise in my stead and let no one know of my absence till the term of 3 days." Then the brothers disguised themselves and returned by night with all secrecy to the palace, where they passed the dark hours. And at dawn they seated themselves at the lattice overlooking the pleasure grounds, when presently the queen and her handmaids came out as before, and passing under the windows made for the fountain. Here they stripped, 10 of them being men to 10 women, and the king's wife cried out, "Where are you, O Saeed?" The hideous blackamoor dropped from the tree straightway, and, rushing into her arms without stay or delay, cried out, "I am Saeed al-Din Saud." The lady laughed heartily, and all fell to satisfying their lusts, and remained so occupied for a couple of hours. The white slaves rose up from the handmaidens' breasts and the blackamoor dismounted from the queen's bosom. Then they went into the pool and cleaned themselves. Then they put on their dresses and retired as they had done before. When King Shahryar saw this infamy of his wife and concubines, he became as one distraught and he cried out, "Only in utter solitude can man be safe from the doings of this vile world. By Allah, life is naught but one great wrong. Do not thwart me, O my brother, in what I propose." And the other answered, "I will not." So, he said, "Let us depart now, we have no concern with kingship, and let us overwander Allah's earth, worshipping the Almighty till we find someone to whom the like calamity had happened, and if we find none then will death be more welcome to us than life." So, the 2 brothers get out through a second private door of the palace, and they never stopped traveling by day and by night, until they reached a tree a middle of a meadow hard by a spring of sweet water on the shore of the salt sea. Both drank from it and sat down to take their rest, and when an hour of the day had gone by, they heard a mighty roar and uproar in the middle of the main, though the heavens were falling upon the earth. Then the sea brake with waves before them, and a towered black pillar came out of it, which grew and grew till it rose up to the sky. After seeing it, they trembled in fear exceedingly and climbed to the top of the tree, when they gazed to see what might be the matter. Behold, it was a jinni, with a very huge body carrying a box of crystal on his head. He strode to land, wading through the deep, and coming to the tree where the 2 kings hiding, and then seated beneath it. He then set down the box on its bottom and take a casket out of it, with 7 padlocks of steel, which he unlocked with 7 keys of steel, and a young lady came out of it, white-skinned, fine, thin, and bright as a moon of the 14th night, or like the sun raining lively. Like the poet Utiah hath excellently said, "She rose like the morn, as she shone through the night, and she gilded the grove with her gracious sight. From her radiance the sun taketh increase, when she unveiled and the moon shine bright. Bow down all beings between her hands, as she showed charms with her veil untight. And she flooded cities with torrent tears, when she flashed her look of 11 light." The jinni seated her under the tree by his side and looking at her said, "O choicest love of this heart of mine! O dame of noblest line, whom I snatched away on the bride night that none might prevent me taking the maidenhead or tumble me before I did, and whom none save myself bath loved or had enjoyed. O my sweetheart! I would like to sleep a little while." He then laid his head upon the lady's thighs, and, stretching out his legs which extended down to the sea, slept and snored and snarked like the roll of thunder. Presently she raised her head towards the treetop and saw the 2 kings hiding. Then she softly lifted off the jinni's head from her lap which she was tired of supporting, and placed it upon the ground. Then standing upright under the tree, signed to the kings, "Come down, you too, and fear not from this beast. They were in a terrible fright when they found that she had seen them and answered her in the same manner, In the name of Allah, O lady, excuse us from coming down. But she rejoined by saying, Allah upon you both that you come down forthright, and if you not come, I will wake up my husband, this beast, and he shall make you to die by the worst of deaths. And she continued making signals to them. So, being afraid, they came down to her and she rose before them and said, Fuck me without stay or delay. Otherwise I will wake up this beast, who shall slay you straight away. They said to her, O our lady, we beg you in the name of Allah, let us get out of this work, for we are terrified from such and in extreme dread and terror of this beast. Then how can we do it in such a way as you desire? Leave this talk. It must be done. And she warned them if they not do her will, she would cause them to be slain and cast into the sea. Whereupon out of fear King Shahryar said to King Shah Zaman, O my brother, do what she told us to do, but he replied, I will not do it till you do it before me. And they began disputing about futtering her. Then she said, I see you disputing and demurring. If you do not come forward like men and fuck me, I will wake him up. At this time, by reason of their fear of the jinni, both did what she asked them to do, and, when they had dismounted from her, she said, Well done. She then took a purse from her pocket and drew out a knotted string, and there were 570 seal rings strung on it, and asked them, Do you know what are these? They answered her saying, We don't know. Then she said, These are the signets of 570 men who have all fucked me upon the fear of this foul, this foolish, this filthy beast. So, give me your 2 seal rings also, you pair of brothers. When they had drawn their 2 rings from their hands and given them to her, she said to them, Of a truth, this beast stole me off on my bride night, and put me into a casket, and set the casket in a coffer, and to the coffer he fixed 7 strong padlocks of steel, and deposited me on the deep bottom of the sea that raves, dashing and clashing with waves, and guarded me so that I might remain chaste and honest. None of them stopped me. But I have lain under as many of my kind as I please, and this wretched jinni don't know that destiny may not be averted nor hindered by anyone, and all woman will do the same, even if she fulfilled by her man. She then said to them, Not relay on women. Do not trust their hearts, their joys and sorrows are hung to their parts lying love, they will swear anything, whence guile ne'er departs. Take Yusuf for sample wear slates and, wear smarts. Iblis ousted Adam, don't trust their acting. Hearing these words they marveled with exceeding marvel, and she went from them to the beast and, place his head on her thigh as before, said to them softly, Now find your ways and stay yourselves beyond the bounds of his malice. So, they fared forth saying either to other, Allah, Allah, and, there be no majesty and there be no might save but Allah, the glorious, the great. And with him we seek refuge from women's malice and slight, for of a truth it hath no mate in might. Consider, O my brother, the ways of this marvelous lady with a jinni who is so much more powerful than we are. Now since this happened to him, a greater mishap than that which befell on us, and which should bear us abundant consolation, so we should return to our countries, and let us decide never to intermarry with womankind, and presently we will show them what will be our action. Thereupon they rode back to the tents of King Shahryar, which they reached on the morning of the 3rd day, and, having mustered the wazirs and emirs, the chamberlains and high officials, he gave a robe of honor to his viceroy and issued orders for an immediate return to the city. There he sat him upon his throne and sent for the chief minister, the father of the 2 girls. Who will presently be mentioned, he said, I command you to take my wife and flog her to death, for she had broken her trust and her faith. So, he carried her to the place of execution and make her die. Then King Shahryar took his blade in hand, and slew all the concubines and their Mamelukes. He also swore himself by a binding oath that whatever wife he married he would treat her well at night and slay her next morning to make sure of his honor. Then he said, There was no chaste woman upon the face of earth. Then Shah Zaman asked for permission to fare homewards, and he went forth equipped, escorted and travelled till he reached his own country. Meanwhile Shahryar commanded his wazir to bring him the bride of the night that he might go into her. So, he produced a most beautiful girl, the daughter of one of the emirs, and the king went in unto her, and at the next morning, he commanded his minister to cut off her head. And the wazir did accordingly in fear of the sultan. He continued this for the next 3 years, marrying a maiden every night and killing her the next morning, till folk raised an outcry against him and cursed him, praying Allah utterly to destroy him and his rule. And women made an uproar, mothers wept, parents fled with their daughters till there remained none in the city a young person fit for the marriage. Presently the king ordered his chief wazir, the same who was charged with the executions, to bring him a virgin as his wont. And the minister went forth and searched and found none. So, he returned home in sorrow and anxiety, fearing for his life from the king. Now he had 2 daughters, Shahrazad and Dunyazad. The elder had presumed the books, annals and legends of preceding kings, and the stories, examples and instances of bygone men and things. Indeed, it was said that she had collected 1,000 books of histories relating to antique races and departed rulers. She had perused the works of the poets and knew them by heart. She had studied philosophy and the sciences, arts and accomplishments, and she was pleasant and polite, wise and witty, well-read and well-bred. Now on that day she said to her father, "Why do I see thee you changed and troubling with something?" Concerning this matter she said, "One of the poets said like this, whoever had sorrow, grief never shall last. Even as joy has no tomorrow, so let it go past." When the wazir heard from his daughter these words, he told her, from first to last, all that had happened between him and the king. Thereupon she said, "By Allah, O my father, how long shall this slaughter of women endure? Shall I tell you what is in my mind, in order to save both sides from destruction?" "Say on, O my daughter," she said. "I wish you would give me in marriage to this King Shahryar. Either I shall live or I shall be an end for the virgin daughters of his country, and the cause of their death from his hand. Allah will lead me." He cried in wrath and had no appetite. He said, "How I send my daughter to her death?" She said, "Make me an icon of this good deed, and let him kill me. I shall only die as like the other girls in this country." "O my daughter, how can that profit, when you have thrown away your life?" And she answered, "O my father, it must be like this, whatever will come of it." The wazir was again moved to fury and blamed and reproached her, ending with, "In very deed I fear lest the same will happen to you, which befell the bull and the ass with the husbandman." "And what?" she asked him, "O my father? What befell on them?" Whereupon, the wazir began the tale of the bull and the ass.